You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107, and today is April Fool's Day, but it is also the first Friday of the month, and that means it is time to catch up with Chris Hall from McNally Robinson Booksellers and find out what he has been reading and what books he recommends for this month of April. And joining me here over Zoom, I am joined by Chris Hall from McNally Robinson. Hi, Chris. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Chris. Nice to see you.
Mm-hmm. Thankfully, we're coming out of one of the coldest, snowiest winters I can remember in recent memory.
Yeah.
Speaking for myself, I very often think of spring as being the start of something new. We get this long stretch of nice weather until we have to suffer again through winter. And it sounds like you've picked some great books to start the spring out with. Let's talk about the first one.
Sure, absolutely. I have to say before I start that I'm looking out of my back deck. I can't wait to get out there with my books. So yes, it's a bit aspirational. But yes, the first book is a novel. We're going to start with fiction. It's called Young Mungo, and it's by Douglas Stewart. Douglas Stewart won the International Booker Prize in 2020 for a book called Shuggie Bain. And like its predecessor, Young Mungo is set in the working class Glasgow, where young Protestant men constantly battling with young Catholic men and wider forces putting fathers out of work and driving them to drink and battle their frustration. And it's in this world that poor young Mungo, he's named after the patron saint of Glasgow. He tries to love and care for his alcoholic mother, and he's caught in a world between his violent older brother and an older sister who's determined to escape their world and get to university. It's a powerful book. It's a difficult book. It's a violent, kind of unkind world, but you end up just rooting for this young Mungo. He's sensitive and just looking for comfort and safety. And there's some really beautiful moments. The writing is top rate. And it ends up being a very, very good book. We have an event with Douglas Stewart. It'll be a virtual event on Thursday, April 28th at 7:00. It'd be really interesting to hear him talk about this world, what connection he has with it and things like that. But a couple of very, very good books, Young Mungo and Shuggie Bain.
Yeah, and I was reading the synopsis, and Mungo, he's gay, and he's got to deal with that aspect of things and growing up in this very violent family. It sounds like just a fantastic book.
It is, yeah.
What's up next?
Next is a completely different kind of book. It's called Sea of Tranquility, and it's by Emily St. John Mandel. Emily St. John Mandel is a Canadian. She's now living in the US. She's written several novels, Glass Hotel, The Last Night in Montreal, and probably most notably Station 11, which was made into a miniseries this year and has been getting a lot of publicity. This new novel is it's made up of separate stories. At least at the beginning, it reads like that. You've got opens up with a British exile on the west coast of Canada in the early 1900s, and then it breaks off into the story of a novelist who she's written a novel about a fictional pandemic, and then she embarks on a galaxy-spanning book tour, and a real outbreak of a pandemic happens. A section that is, I'm sure, partly autobiographical, since Station 11 kind of fits that description. And then, of course, there's another section where a resident of a moon colony 300 years in the future tells her story. So it doesn't take you too long to realize that these stories are connected, and they're connected by the presence of some kind of time traveler. And one of the pleasures of the book is to slowly and steadily have these storylines kind of come together in a kind of explanation. I'm not generally a reader of science fiction. I for some reason, I just really don't go there. But I really enjoyed this one. This was okay by me.
Yeah, there's sort of these two themes. I was reading. There's this idea of this violin playing in a airship going. So from a classical music standpoint, that resonates with me. This whole idea of the violin.
Yeah.
And the other big one is the whole idea of the pandemic. And what we've just come through. That is also a major sort of running theme in the book, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which might scare you off, but it's underplayed. It's not, it's obviously there, but but yeah, it resonates. But yeah, you're right. The violin playing is a central role in the connections between these stories. There's a lot going on.
It sort of ties everything together. What's up next? What's the next book?
We're going to go to nonfiction here. It's a book called The Power of Teamwork, How We Can All Work Better Together. And it's by Dr. Brian Goldman. He is known as a author of a previous book called The Power of Kindness, but probably best known for his show on CBC Radio, White Coat, Black Art. And this book is a new teamwork approach to healthcare, which he knows very well. It's leading to healthier patients, happier staff, more efficient operations. And so this model has been noticed beyond the health world. It's being used now in manufacturing, business, customer service, entertainment, and sports, ironically, which turns out is only about teamwork in the final product, not so much in the behind the scenes. So I'm a big fan of this approach. I think of my workplace as a team, that we all have a role, we all play together for working together, and I think these days people want a role. There's lessons for parenting in here. There's lessons for managing. There's lessons with just getting along with people that you work with. It was a good book. It's got a lot of good advice.
I found it fascinating that it's also teamwork in sports, but also the military as well. There were implicated that went over into that as well, which again,
well, military is almost that of the hype of top-down management, right? You just do what you're told, and teamwork, you have to understand what you're being told. You have to understand how you fit in, and how your role makes a difference. And people I'm convinced you get the best out of people when they're engaged and when they're interested in what they're doing. So
absolutely. Mm-hmm. What's up next?
Next, we're back to fiction. So I've got lots of fiction for people to read. This novel is called The Candy House. It's by Jennifer Egan. She's the author of a previous novel called Manhattan Beach, which I really loved and recommend highly, as well as a novel called A Visit from the Goon Squad, which I haven't read, but it forms the prequel to this new novel. And that's enough to say you don't really have to have read the previous novel to like this one. I really like this one on its own. So it's a novel set more or less in our time, but technology is kind of at another level. So it's probably truer to say it's in the very near future. Social media has kind of come and gone. It's been replaced by something called Own Your Unconscious. And you participate in this platform, but literally by downloading and externalizing your memory. You attach electrodes to your head and you download your memories and thoughts and you add them to the collective. And from there, everyone can see them. So the world is full of counters who manage the data that comes from all that. And then, of course, there's the eluders who refuse to contribute to this collective. It's a world where surveillance is everywhere. And it's all the effects of this technology, both on people and society. I found it really creepy and eerie, but awfully familiar.
Yes, I was just going to go to that. I mean, as I was reading about it, I'm thinking, well, a lot of people are doing that now. I mean, with their phones, it's amazing when you go to like a big function and people are standing there with their phone holding it up instead of just living in the moment and taking it all in, right?
Exactly. And then sharing the memories. It's metaphorical in this sense, at least at this point, but it still ends up at the same place, it feels.
And again, with our phones, it's sort of everybody, it's been in a lot lately, technology companies knowing what we're looking at and the rest of it. Yeah, it's very poignant.
Absolutely.
Very poignant. And the last book, what do you have up next?
Getting a little bit closer to home. Another novel. This one's called The Gunsmith's Daughter by Winnipeg's own Margaret Sweatman. And we've got an event in the works for her as well, although you'll have to stay tuned. I don't have a date and time as of yet. But she is an author of several novels herself, including Fox and The Players. And this new one is set in 1971. The main character named Lilac Welsh, and she lives at a place called Rough Rock on the Winnipeg River. And her father, Cal, he's built his wealth by designing powerful guns and ammunition, and he's on the cusp of producing kind of the next level of powerful rifle. And a young stranger named Gavin just turns up out of the blue. He brings a kayak into their place, and he just wants to meet this what he considers this heroic man. And then Gavin's off to enlist in the Vietnam War. He's going to go down to Grand Forks to go off to war. So Lilac is inspired by that meeting. She becomes a journalist who reports on the war, and the result is a really interesting combination of things. It's mostly a story of her coming of age, and that's important because it really gets kind of anchored in Lilac and her life. But it's able to engage in issues like the Canada-U.S. relations, wealth and power, ambition and politics. There was a lot going on beyond lilac. And I really enjoyed the way, for me, in Winnipeg, reading a book about a place very, very close to here, very, very familiar to here, that goes off into the world, this big, scary world in some ways, and all of its complicated connections. I thought it really kind of resonated for me. It's one of the interesting pleasures of reading a book that is set so close to home.
And so you were saying that she becomes a journalist. Like, does the book talk about how is she critical? She must be critical of the war, right?
Yeah, it's certainly
and
not. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it gets into the fact her family wealth is built on guns that kill young men and others, and yeah, it certainly engages in that. Not it's not pro-war, that's for sure. Yeah.
Is there any like she's from Winnipeg? Is there an autobiographical aspect to this? Do you know?
I'm not sure. That would be a good question for Margaret Sweatman at her event, but I don't know. It gets very, very. Another interesting part about it is Lilac lives in a house kind of in the middle of nowhere, close to Manaki, is what it says. And so out on the lake, you can only get to it by boat. So it really starts in a very natural world of fishing and boating and ice and cold and warm and things that very, very natural, and then goes out from there. So she's obviously very good at describing that world. So I would suspect she knows of what she writes.
Chris, the books you've picked sound just great. It sounds like it's going to be a great month of April, and with your books that you've selected. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. As always, it's been great.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for having me again.